Hi, I'm David Alford.
And I'm Madeleine Bullen.
And this is Cine-pop Reacts. Today we're talking about Pixar's Soul, their 23rd feature film release. Hard to believe it's been that many. We've seen them all.
Yeah.
Several times.
All of them.
And Soul is new, and it's kind of different in that it didn't actually get released in cinemas. It got released on Disney+.
Yeah.
Big move.
It really was. And they also didn't put it behind a paywall like they did with Mulan. It was one of their first, like, straight to Disney Plus
if you've got the service,
movies
you can see the channel.
They did for free.
It's amazing. Big movie, big concepts, big style.
Yeah.
A lot of things changed on this one. Some good, some shaky.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into it. Jamie Foxx led the cast as Joe Gardner, and this is monumental in that it's the first to have an African American lead in a Disney Pixar cartoon.
Yeah, which is kind of incredible to me that it hasn't happened until
in
now.
22 films.
Yeah, that this is like a monumental moment in 2020 is kind of strange to me.
It feels a little late.
It's a little bit, yes.
I loved Jamie Foxx in this movie.
I did too. I didn't recognize his voice either.
Well, he felt like a dad.
He did.
And he is a dad now, so that makes a difference.
I haven't seen him in an awful lot, but when I was listening to it, I had no idea. I was completely immersed in the character of Joe. I didn't even think about who the actor was until I looked at it later, and I was just so impressed with his performance. It was really
This one was headed up by Pete Docter. He's kind of been a guru at Pixar for a long time now. Headed up Monsters University, which was a big hit in your childhood. That was a big thing.
that one.
He's been kind of the Lasseter replacement as far as heading up a lot of the creativity of what happens at Pixar. He's a good storyteller.
He really is.
And he didn't do it by himself. He had some help. But as far as the story itself, he's kind of the guiding force behind this. And as always, Pixar's so great about creating a world to live in.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say in this one, the world is so gorgeous.
It was such a beautiful movie.
It's worth the trip all by itself. The fact that the story's a little shaky and a little bit weird, I think is like a side thing.
Yeah.
But from our perspective, it was worth the trip.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed the art of it so much.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
I could sit there and just watch the world. The New York that they built was just beautiful.
You could take still shots and like hang it on your wall and decorate your house, and it would be stunning.
And the animation, Pixar's always been in the lead of this kind of animation. They've always been pushing boundaries and the detail in their animation. This was another step, and I didn't even know that they could take it another step, but they really did take it even farther in their details.
Yeah, as far as the details, I loved the actors' facial responses. Great moment, Felicia Rashad. Everyone's, America's mom. She's America's mom, and she's just oozes class. That scene with her and Jamie Foxx's character, it made the film.
No, it really did.
It was just so touching. It was so powerful. So well acted.
Yeah,
I was like, can you give Academy Awards to cartoons?
I mean, you can, but what was so impressive with a lot of those scenes is you felt the dynamic between the two actors, but it's an animated film.
Yes.
So that's something I hadn't really seen before, is you could feel the reactions and, like you were saying, just the facial expressions, but you could kind of feel the energy between two characters in an animated film in a way that you really haven't seen before, and I was really just engrossed with the whole world, and the characters felt very real. Joe and
John Batiste's music,
the
jazz music, that guy made he's the hero of the movie.
And this is my first complaint. I wanted more jazz music. I wanted more music.
Yes.
I loved the scoring. I absolutely loved the scoring, and I just wish there had been more of it. Like, I really enjoyed them.
Okay, so the movie to me kind of breaks up into three channels. There's almost like three separate things going on here. There's Joe Gardner's real life scenario.
Yes.
And if you've seen the movie, you know the plot's really complicated. We can spend all 20 minutes talking about the plot.
But
his real life with his neighborhood, his school, he's a teacher. There's that storyline.
Right.
Loved that storyline.
Yeah.
The whole movie could have been that storyline, and I'd have been great.
Yeah, I could have just focused on Joe and his life and would have been perfect.
But then we break away that through an accident. We end up in the Great Before, this metaphysical, cubist, almost bizarre world.
It was a little Picasso-y with
the
little
shape in the features.
Yeah,
it's artistic and it's really interesting visually.
It was visually a really nice contrast to the real world. You never felt confused about the two worlds. Just because the real world had so many rich tones and reds, and it was very bright, and then it was a very pastel, artistic palette for the Great Before and the Great.
But the Great Before, kind of a place where souls begin, and they begin their creation, and they go to the earth, and then they live out their lives or find their purpose in life. It's an interesting concept. To me, that part of the story had a lot of mushy rules to it.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand. I mean, they were trying to explain, or not trying, I don't know if they were trying to explain. They were just kind of giving a cartoon example of what something might be theoretically.
I think it was
so the world
story. It was a plot device.
Yes, it was a plot
and
device.
it was not a good explanation of any of how life and death and
I don't think it tried
souls.
to be.
No, it was just kind of like, this is our fun plot device. A little bit like Inside Out and how they dealt with memories and things like that.
Yes.
Their world in that. Some of it was like really truly grounded in good like psychology and the understanding, and some of it was a plot device. And that's okay. It's forgivable in this.
This movie doesn't try to offer theology of any kind. It doesn't. That's not its purpose. That was not. But it's a world with the rules are kind of fluid. And for me, for storytelling, it's hard to know what we can and can't do. So it's hard to know what the story can and can't do. So for me, it gets a little mushy in that middle part. Mm-hmm. And to me, it gets kind of bogged down in it all.
The pace changes.
The pace changes. It really sags a little bit.
Joe, spoiler alert, dying in the first like 15 it just surprised me. It was
jarring.
So fast. So it was like, I thought the whole movie was going this different direction.
Yeah.
Then he falls down a manhole, and then the whole movie just takes off in a different way. And it surprised me.
Yeah, it was surprising and a little unsettling, and possibly for younger kids, really unsettling.
Yeah.
Because if you've attached yourself to this main character, all of a sudden he's lying dead on the floor, and his spirit, which is now a green blob, is in the great before.
With a hat.
Which with like I said, with the storytelling structure, it gets a little mushy. Now we switch gears again to a third storyline, which feels like a third separate movie.
Yeah.
And that is when Joe comes back and his new friend 22, another little spirit, they land on Earth and switch bodies. The 22 ends up in Joe's body, and Joe ends up in the cat's body.
Yeah,
and it becomes an Abbott and Costello comedy.
It reminded me of like that movie Freaky Friday, and that's all I could think of.
The feline version.
The feline version of Freaky Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all I had in my mind. It was just such a departure from when we got to the great before. Like, okay, maybe this is really going to be an intellectual, metaphysical movie about all. That's not where I thought we were going, but I was like, okay, I'm on it. And then I'm like, wait, now it's just a slapstick comedy about a man trying to be a cat
and a cat who's
and
a man.
And a soul trying to test out life in a human body.
Granted, it was funny, and it picked up the energy of the movie quite a bit. So for the kids especially, I think they will find that part helpful.
Yeah, it's
as far as keeping their attention. But it, again, felt like a separate movie to me altogether.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think, the problem with this movie is it's uneven.
Yeah.
And it took on a lot. It took on a big bite of philosophy and metaphysical thinking and life, and extrapolating big questions that it tried to ask.
Yeah.
Like, what's the purpose of life? Why are we here? Is there life after this life?
Well, and how it dealt with
tackled big
anxiety
issues.
and depression, with the being a lost soul, and what that all means. That's a whole separate, like, that could have been a movie. That could have been a story.
Each of these topics could have been 5 movies by themselves, and they crammed it all into one.
Tried to take off
so
a lot.
It got big, and it didn't quite. I think it took on so much it didn't quite cover it.
It just didn't answer any of it.
No,
it just kind of like popped up big idea and then moved on to the next large idea, which is a little bit hard because my brain sometimes was still back on the idea 20 minutes ago and trying to figure out how that fit into where we were going with the story. And I was like, all right, so how does, what your spark is fit with this concept of lost souls? It doesn't. It really doesn't. It was like, here's an idea. And then we just kept going. And
well, and by the end, you end up with this concept like life is great. Don't take it for granted.
Right.
Live your life to its fullest. You can put that in a Hallmark card and call it a day.
Which I felt let down with.
Yes.
I was rooting for Pixar. I was rooting for some like really great reveal at the end where it suddenly explained what they were like, what the overall
why we took on this project in the first place.
What were they really trying to say? What are they trying to say about passion and spark? And I was toward the end, I was like, okay, there's a couple different ways we could go with this. They're going to wrap it with some like philosophical like mic drop and then it'll be done.
I'll go, ooh.
No, he goes back to life and he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's not taking it for granted, which again,
which is good, I guess.
After all those big concepts, I was expecting the end to have a big like tie together that I was going to be impressed at. And I was not as impressed with the end.
No, I feel like the movie was pulled in a lot of different directions and maybe creatively was pulled in a lot of different directions and never quite came all together.
Well, and they've come back and said, the creators came back and said that they weren't sure how to end the movie and that they had written several different endings. And this was the ending that ultimately got picked because at the end of he does sacrifice himself for 22 kind of, because it was really 22's spark to begin with, his way to get back. But he was going to go off to the great beyond and have lived his life and be done. And that was originally
That was the ending.
That was the ending. It was just that he had done it, and he was satisfied with the life he had, and that he got to pass on something to 22, and her life was better because of him. And then they decided, it's a children's movie. Maybe we don't kill off our hero twice.
You don't know.
And then send his soul into a bright light. Maybe that's a downer.
Is it a children's movie? That's the question. I don't think it is.
No.
This is not when you hand the kids the popcorn and set them on the couch and say, have fun, kids. You just don't. It addresses too many big life issues. It brings up too many big life questions. As a parent, you got to be there at least and be ready to talk about some things you might not have been ready to talk about before you turned on the movie.
And that's the my children are 4 and 2, and we've watched some Pixar movies and have loved them. Cars is an ultimate favorite in our house.
Yes, it is.
But this was not one of them. And I was a little disappointed because I enjoy getting to watch new movies with my kids. But then as soon as I found out it was about life and death, that's not a...
They're not ready for that.
And I don't want a Pixar movie to explain life and death to my 4-year-old. That's not what I would like.
Imagine that.
And I feel like Inside Out started veering this direction because there's some really heavy concepts in that movie and it was well done. It was more family friendly, I think, than Soul, but it started moving in that direction of trying to teach people or open up topics about really big life things, which is awesome. But maybe I've talked to your kids about it before you show them the movie and then after the movie.
Watch it first. I'd say watch it first and decide if you even want to show it to the kids.
That being said, it's a really... I watched it with a bunch of young adults together, and it was a really great discussion starter for us, especially some of the people who was watching it with us who were right at the end of high school and trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. And that was a really fun, interesting discussion starter, and like really brought up a lot of great questions. But wouldn't watch it with small children.
Okay, we got to address the elephant in the room. Okay, the race issue of the whole movie has been brought up and argued back and forth. I mean, this is Disney putting the African American culture front and center in this movie. However, and Disney has not got a great track record.
No.
I mean, if you look back at their old catalog, you say they put cultural warnings on some of their catalogs.
On most of their older catalog,
the way they treated Native Americans in Peter Pan, the way Song of the South treated African Americans.
That's not even on there. You're not allowed to see that one anymore.
Yeah, that's been banned altogether. I mean, they don't have a great track record.
No.
And here we are, 2021 now, and what we hit on it with the Princess and the Toad, or Princess and the Frog. Prince and the Frog. They hit on it there, but some would argue not as well. I mean, a fine movie from what I understand.
Yeah.
But the prince and the princess spend like half the movie as frogs.
Yeah.
So they're African Americans who get turned into frogs and spend half the movie as green frogs. Now, that comes up again, like Spies in Disguise just came out last year. The African American lead in that spends half the movie as a pigeon. And now we have Joe Gardner spending half of the movie as a green blob.
And a cat.
And a cat. So we have to ask ourselves, now those all aren't Disney movies, but those are the last 3 big representations. So we have to ask ourselves, is this enough? Are we doing enough here?
Well, and some of the arguments have been made just because they use so much of the black culture in specifically like New York with like the barber shops and
great moments in
and
this.
they have people breakdancing. They have like this beautiful this beautiful artistic look into this culture
jazz music, but not the heroes of jazz music.
No, and then they kind of also don't, obviously because it is a kids movie, they don't talk about struggles that they have. So it feels like an odd skewed representation is what some of the people have argued, and we don't have a place to really speak on it too much. We're really not qualified to talk about it. Just because we've not lived, that's not our life experience. But there are really great articles out there that just explain some of the issues that the Black community has had with the movie and how Disney and Pixar have chosen to use Black people in representation. And it's very interesting. And Kemp Powers, who is a co-director, was brought on originally to help create the character of Joe and help give authenticity to the Black experience. And I think he really brought a lot to it. And you could tell he had a big hand in those scenes. And those, I think that's one of the reasons they felt so real and they resonated with everyone, is just really great scenes. And those are the scenes that people will still point to and be like, look, those are like the specifically the barbershop scene, like that's a really wonderful representation.
But here's the controversy, and I don't know if it's controversial. It didn't start off to be this movie about Joe Gardner.
No.
When Pixar originated this concept, it wasn't what we have today.
No, it was a story about 22. And that was the focus of the story. And
a soul trying to find their purpose in life.
Exactly. And then they kind of tried to figure out a vehicle for that, and then eventually landed on the character of Joe Gardner. So it wasn't really written to be about it wasn't a story originated to be about a black man. It was a story originated about a soul, and then they decided to add a black man into it.
And I think that explains the hodgepodgeness of it. It's not as well thought out. The whole story. I think it explains why it's kind of hit and miss in some places, and some things just aren't handled well. And I don't think anyone set out to create a problem, but it's not a film that features the black experience up front. It's one that's had it layered on top of it.
Yeah.
And so some of the pieces don't connect well.
No. And that's I think the whole story that's true in why it has basically 3 different plots is because it was trying to take a couple different movies and like squish them together. And then sadly, I think the representation kind of got messed up along the way. Mixed messages.
There were some mixed messages thrown in there that I think communicated things that I don't think the creators intended. I think they were caught by surprise that's how people took it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But in the end, we still have a beautiful film.
Oh, it is truly beautiful movie.
It does break new ground that needs to have been broken a long time
ago.
Again,
why it hasn't been broken before now is just unendingly confusing to me. But they did a good job with really specific things.
Yes.
Again, more jazz music should have been in the movie because it's about a jazz musician, and it made me sad that we didn't have more.
So bottom line, a phenomenal cast.
Yeah.
Some of the best actors in Hollywood covering some of the most interesting roles you'll see. Good, solid storytelling, a little mushy in themes, a little mushy in ideas, but nothing offensive.
No.
If you're looking for Christian affirmation of afterlife, you're going to find not much there. You're going to find really no religious affirmation of any kind from any kind of religion. You're going to find a really generic, mushy kind of afterlife concept.
They just kind of wash their hands of that. They try really hard to avoid any religion at all. And they do a good job avoiding it. Yep. I would say, we talk about this, we have a fully written review of this movie on our website, Cine-pop moviereviews.com. We talk about it a little more in that review. Yep. But if the afterlife and heaven and what that means and how souls are created is something that's really important to you, that it is represented well from a Christian perspective, just don't watch.
No,
this is not the movie. You're not going to find it here. If you're okay with it being a plot device, because that's what this is. This is a plot device.
And you don't want this to be your kid's first explanation of anything. So you want to make sure that your kid's old enough to already have established a concept of what they believe, because this movie isn't going to
This isn't going to give you any belief at all.
However, it is a beautiful piece of art.
Yes, it is.
I think as adults, we can appreciate the animation. It's beyond anything we've seen in our lifetimes as far as animation is concerned. So enjoy it for that, if you want to enjoy it for that. But bottom line, grab some popcorn, have fun with it. Adults, if you want to include the kids, that's up to you.
Again, watch it first. Think about the discussion and themes you wanted to talk about. But yeah, older teens to adults, it's a really good time. It's a heartwarming story.
Great music.
Yeah, great music, great animation. Just so much fun to watch. Like, it was just a genuine joy to watch.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Cine-pop Reacts.